Hey guys, it's Miss A again. Now we're going to be looking at a video to help you remember how to change a decimal into a fraction. This is probably the one that we spent the least amount of time in class. You don't see it very often, but it is a skill you need to know how to do. You have to also be able to, once you make it into fraction, you have to make sure the fraction is in simplest form. That's one step you'll always forget, is that you can make it into a fraction out of 100 or out of 10, but you always forget to reduce it in the end. So make sure that you simplify every single fraction whenever you get one. So here we go. So to change a decimal into a fraction, we need to do three things. We need to say it, write it, and then simplify it. So the first thing we need to look at, and if you have your packet that y'all should have got on Monday from school, this is actually in your packet, the place values. So we have place values here. In order to say it and write it, you have to know what the place values are in the decimals. So you can see here, these are our whole numbers, the whole part, and this is the decimal part. So the most important thing whenever you're naming it, whenever you say it and write it, you have to know what the decimal part is, because that's going to tell you if you're going to put a denominator of 10 or a denominator of 100 or 1,000 or 10,000, whatever it may be. So we have the decimal point here in the middle. We have the tenths, the hundredths place, the thousandths place, the 10,000ths, and the 100,000ths. We're not going to get that big, but you will get, you'll use these first three decimal places a lot. Okay, so we'll have this, I'll refer back to it whenever we are writing the decimals. All right, so our first example is the decimal of 0.25. The way I typically say it whenever I'm writing it or talking about it is I actually just say the numbers like I just did, 0.25. But really, whenever you want to say this fraction, say this decimal, you don't want to say 0.25. You want to use place value. So how to determine what the place value is all depends on that very last decimal place. So in this case, it's the 5. And you can see after my decimal, I have 1, 2 numbers. So if you look up here, if we have after our decimal, our second place value is the hundredths. So wherever that last number falls, that tells you what how you're going to say it. So in this case, we have 25. The 5 is in the hundredths place, so we're going to simply say 25, and then whatever the place value was, which in this case is hundredths. So we're going to put a 100. Okay, so we said it. We wrote it. Now we need to simplify it, because again, this is not in simplest form. We need to make sure we simplify or reduce the fraction always. So you could start off, when we simplify, we're dividing. You could start off really simple by seeing that both numbers end in a 5 and a 0, so you automatically can reduce it by 5. The only problem with that is that's not the greatest common factor, so you're going to have to divide again or simplify again. So if you can find that greatest common factor, which in this case is 25, it's going to only make you have to simplify just once. Okay, so here I know that 25 goes into both 25 and 100, so we're going to reduce or simplify by 25 over 25. So now we can divide 25 divided by 25 will get me 1. And then 100 divided by 25 will get me 4. Remember, guys, whenever you're dividing by 25, think of quarters. So you have $1. If you break it into quarters, you're going to have 4 quarters. So you put a denominator of 4. So 0.25 or 25 hundredths reduces down to 1/4. So we change the decimal into a fraction. One way you could check yourself and just make sure that you got the correct fraction, let's say I'm not sure if I reduced correctly. All you would have to do to prove that this does equal the fraction is what we talked about in an earlier video, is Taibou. So top in, bottom out, and do the division. 4 can't go into 1, so you put a 0, add a decimal and a 0. 4 goes into 10 2 times, which is 8. Subtract, we get 2, and then add another 0. 4 goes into 20 5 times. So then by taking that extra little step, we've just proved that our fraction that we got of 1/4 did in fact equal the original decimal of 0.25 or 25 hundredths. All right, let's do another one. Number 2. So here we have 0.8. 0.8. So we're going to again look at our place value. We see we only have one number past the decimal. So look at our place value. One place value past the decimal is the tenths place. So to say this number, we would say that it is 8. And then because it's in the tenths place, we say tenths. So 8 tenths. And now we're going to simplify or reduce. Both of these numbers are even. 8 is an even number and 10 is an even number. So you know you can automatically divide by 2. I would always do that, especially if you're not very good at recognizing those bigger numbers that go into those bigger factors. Just pick a small one. Might as well, dividing by 2 cuts the numbers in half. So make the numbers smaller, a little bit easier to look at. So we're going to divide by the common factor of 2. 8 divided by 2 equals 4. And then 10 divided by 2 equals 5. And that cannot be simplified anymore. So I know my simplified fraction is 4/5. Again, you could prove it by Taeboing, top and bottom out, the 4/5. You would just set it up like this. 5 can't go into 4, so you add a decimal and a 0, and then 5 goes into 48 times. So that proves that 4/5 does in fact equal 0.8. All right, now I'm going to show you a little bit of a shortcut. I've showed a couple of y'all this before. If you're not very good at remembering the place values, like what each one is called, one thing you can do to help you make a decimal into a fraction is this. So we're going to take the decimal, which in this case is 0.13 hundredths, and we're going to write it without the 0 first, so 0.13. And to make it in a fraction, here's this cool little trick. So we're going to draw a fraction bar. We're going to take that decimal and drag it down to make it into a 1. And then how many numbers were after the decimal? 1, 2. So that's how many zeros you put. 2 zeros. So the fraction is equal to 13 over 100. 13 hundredths. And this one was actually, we got lucky and that one was already simplified. 13 is a prime number, so it cannot be simplified at all. So that's a little trick to help you. If you're not quite sure on the place values, you can do it real quick and simple by just drawing a fraction bar, dragging down your decimal into a 1, and then adding the zeros. So let's do one more like that so you can see it. One more example. 0.125 or 125 thousandths, which we'll see here in a second. So we're going to take the decimal without the 0, so 0.125. We're going to make a fraction, and then we're going to drag that decimal down into a 1. And then I have 1, 2, 3 numbers, so that's how many zeros I put. There's 3 numbers, so I put 1, 2, 3 zeros. So my fraction is 125 over 1,000. Now that one is a very big fraction, very big numbers. So we do need to simplify it. Again, you could start small. I know that both of these numbers end in a 5 and a 0, so I know 5 could go into it. But I'm going to think of an even bigger number. I'm going to think of 25, because 25 I can think of quarters. So we're going to divide both numbers by 25. So I know if I take $1.25, which is $1.25, and I divide that into quarters, I'm going to have 5 quarters, because 4 quarters make $1. 1, 2, 3, 4 make $1. And then if I add one more, that's 25 cents. So $1.25 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I get 5. All right, here, this is 1,000 cents, which is $10. So we are going to take the $10 and divide it into quarters. So again, there are 4 quarters in every dollar. So 4 times 10 gets me 40. But we need to simplify one more time, because I can see here that both numbers end in a 5 and a 0. So I know I can reduce it by 5. 5 divided by 5 gets me 1. And then 40 divided by 5 gets me 8. So 1/8. So my decimal was 0.125. And then we got it down as a fraction as 1/8. 1/8. Again, if we wanted to prove it, just to make sure that we got it correct, all you would have to do is Taebo, top in, bottom out. 8 can't go into 1. Put a decimal and a 0, drag the decimal up. 8 goes into 10 one time, with the remainder of 2. Add a 0. 8 goes into 22 times, which is 16. Subtract, we get 4. And then add one more 0, and we see that 8 goes into 40 5 times. Once you have your remainder of 0, you can stop. So we can see that our decimals do match. So my fraction equivalent of 0.125 or 125 thousandths is 1/8. All right, guys. So there we go. Decimals into fractions. Say it, write it. Don't forget to simplify it. Okay. And remember, another thing you can do to simplify when the numbers are small enough, don't forget to use your multiplication chart. I've taught how we find the numbers 8 and 10 on top of each other. I don't have one, or else I would show you. Find the 8 and 10 on top of each other and then move over, and you would see that it was equal to 4/5. So if the numbers are small enough, make sure you are using your chart. You can use it for more than just multiplication. All right. Hope this helps. Bye, guys.